Hi everyone, it's October 23rd, sort of. So let's see what's going on October 23rd. Up in the morning, out on the job, I hassled the things, then checked around outside. A black feather lay near our front door. Could be one of Nightwind's. Could be openers on a nasty spell. Could just be a stray feather. I carried it across the road to the field and pissed on it. Greymalk wasn't about, so I walked over to Larry's place. He let me in, and I told him everything that had happened since I'd last seen him. We ought to check that hillside, he said. Could there'd been a chapel there in the old days? True. Want to walk over now? Let's. I studied his plants while he went for a jacket. There were certainly some exotic ones. I hadn't told him yet about Linda Enderby, perhaps because he'd revealed in passing all they'd spoken of was botany. Perhaps the great detective really was interested in plants. He returned with his jacket, and we went out. It was somewhat blustery when we reached the open fields. At one point, we came across a trail of huge, misshapen footprints leading off in the direction of the good doctor's farmhouse of the perpetual storm. I sniffed them. Death. The big man's been out again, I remarked. I haven't been over there to say hello, Larry said. I'm beginning to wonder now whether he isn't a rather famous man I've already met, seeking to further his work. He did not elaborate, as we came upon a crossbow bolt about then, stuck into the bole of a tree. What about Vicar Roberts? I said. Ambitious man. I wouldn't be surprised if his aim is to be the only one left standing at the end, sole beneficiary of the opening. What about Lynette? This doesn't require a human sacrifice, you know. It just sort of greases the wheels. I've been thinking about her, he said. Perhaps on the way back we could go by the vicarage and you could show me which room is hers. I don't know myself, but I'll get Greymalk to show me, and then I'll show you. Do that. We walked on, coming at last to the slopes of the small hill I had determined to be the center. So this is the place? He remarked. More or less. Give or take a little every which way. It doesn't usually work with maps the way most do. We wandered a bit then. Just your average hillside, he said finally. Nothing special about it, unless those trees are the remains of some sacred grove. But they're saplings. They look like new growth to me. Yes, me too. I have a funny feeling you're still missing something to the equation. I'm in this version? Yes. We've discussed this before. If you take me out, where does it move to? The other side of the hill, and farther south and east, roughly the same distance as from your place to a point across the road from Owen's. Let's take a look. We climbed the hill and climbed back down to the other side. From there, we walked southeastward. Finally, we came to a marshy area where I halted. Over that way, I said, maybe 50 or 60 paces. I don't see any point in mucking around in it when we can see it from here. It all looks the same. Yes, unpromising. He scanned the area for a time. Either way, then, he said finally, you must still be leaving something out. A mystery player? I asked. Someone who's been lying low this whole time? It seems as if there must be. Has it ever happened before? I thought hard, recalling games gone by. It's been tried, I said then, but the others always found him out. Why? Things like this, he said, pieces that don't fit any other way. Well, this is fairly late in the game. It's never gone this long. Everyone's always known everyone else by this time, with only about a week to go. In those situations where someone was hiding out, how did you go about discovering them? We usually all know by the death of the moon. If something seems wrong afterwards that can only be accounted for by the presence of another player, the power is then present to do a divination operation to determine that person's identity or location. Don't you think it might be worth giving a try? Yes, you're right. Of course, it's not really my specialty. Even though I know something about all of the operations, I'm a watcher and I'm a calculator. I'll get someone else to give it a try, though. Who? I don't know yet. I'll have to find out who's good at it and then suggest it formally so that I get to share the results. I'll share them with you then, of course. What if it's someone you can't stand? Doesn't matter. There are rules, even if you're trying to kill each other. If you don't follow them, you don't last long. I may have something that person will want, like the ability to do an odd calculation, say, for something other than the center. Such as, oh, the place where a body can be found, the place where a certain herb can be located, the store that carries a particular ingredient. Really? I never knew about these secondary calculations. How hard are they to perform? Some are very hard, some are easy. We turned and began walking back. How hard's the body finding one? He asked as we climbed the hill. They're fairly easy, actually. What if you tried for the police officer we put in the river? Now that could be tricky, since there are a lot of extra variables involved. If you just misplaced a body, though, or knew that someone had died but didn't know where, that wouldn't be too hard. That does sound like a kind of divination, he said. When you talk about being an anticipator, of having a pretty good idea of when something's going to happen, or how, or who will be there, isn't that a kind of divination? No, I think it's more of a kind of subconscious knack for dealing with statistics against a fairly well-known field of actions. Well, some of my calculations would probably be a lot closer to doing overtly what you seem to be doing subconsciously. You may well be an intuitive calculator. That business about finding the body, though, that smacks of divination. It only seems that way to an outsider. Besides, you've just seen what can happen to my calculations if I'm missing some key factor. That's hardly divinatory. Supposing I told you that I've had a strong feeling all morning that one of the players has died. That's a little beyond me, I'm afraid. I'd need to know who it was and some more of the circumstances. I really deal more with facts and probabilities than things like that. Are you serious about this feeling? Yes, it's a real anticipation. Did you feel it when the count got staked? No, I didn't, but then I don't believe he's technically considered living to begin with. Quibble, quibble, I said, and he caught the smile and smiled back. It takes one to know one, I guess. You want to show me Dog's Nest? You've gotten me curious. Come on, I said, and we went and climbed up to it. At the top, we walked around a bit. As I showed him the stone we had been sucked through, its inscription had become barely noticeable scratchings again. He couldn't make them out either. Nice view from here, though, he said, turning and studying the land about us. Oh, there's the manse. I wonder if Mrs. Enderby's cuttings are taking. There was my opening. I could have seized it right then, I suppose, and told him the whole story from Soho to here, but at least I realized then what was holding me back. He reminded me of someone I once knew, Rocco. Rocco was a big, floppy-eared hound, always happy, bouncing around and slavering over life with such high spirits that some found it annoying, and he was very single-minded. I called to him one day on the street, and he just dashed across, not even paying puppy attention to his surroundings. Got run over by a cart. I rushed to his side, and damned if he didn't still seem happy to see me in those final moments. If I'd kept my muzzle shut, he could have stayed happier a lot longer. Now, well, Larry wasn't stupid like Rocco, but he had a singular capacity for enthusiasm, long frustrated by a big problem in his case. He seemed on the way to working out some means for dealing with his problem now, and the great detective in his guise had assumed, and the great detective in the guise he had assumed was cheering Larry up a good deal. Since I didn't really see him as giving much away, I thought of Rocco and said to hell with it later. We climbed down then and headed back, and I let him tell me about tropical plants and temperate plants and arctic plants and diurnal nocturnal plant cycles and herbal medicines from many cultures. When we neared Rastov's place, I saw at first what appeared to be a piece of rope hanging from a tree limb blowing in the wind. A moment later, I realized it to be quicklime, signaling for my attention. I veered to the left-hand side of the road, quickening my pace. Snuff! I was looking for you, he called. He's done it! He's done it! What? I said to him. Did himself in. I found him hanging when I returned from my foraging. I knew he was depressed. I told you. How long ago was this? About an hour, he said. Then I went to look for you. When did you go out? Before dawn. He was all right then? Yes, he was sleeping. He'd been drinking last night. Are you sure he did this to himself? There was a bottle on the table nearby. that doesn't mean anything the way he'd been drinking. Larry had halted, and when he'd seen I was engaged in a conversation, I excused myself from quicklime to bring Larry up to date. Sounds as if your anticipation was right, I said, but I couldn't have calculated this one. Then a thought occurred. The icon, I said. Is it still there? It wasn't anywhere in sight, Quicklime replied, but it usually isn't, unless he takes it out for some reason. Did you check where he normally keeps it? I can't. That would take hands. There's a loose board under his bed. It lies flush and looks normal, but comes up easily for someone with fingers. There's a hollow space beneath it. He keeps it there, wrapped in a red silk bandana. I'll get Larry to lift the board, I said. Is there an unlocked door? I don't know. You'll have to try them. Usually he keeps them locked. If they are, my window is open a crack as usual. You can raise it up and get in that way. We headed for the house. Quicklime slithered down and followed us. The front door was unlocked. We entered and waited till Quicklime was beside us. Which way? I asked him. Straight ahead, through a door, he said. We did that, entering a room I had viewed from outside on an earlier inspection. And Rastoff hung there from a rope tied to a rafter, wild black hair and beard framing his pale face, dark eyes bulging, a trickle of blood having run from the left corner of his mouth into his beard, dried now into a dark, scar-like ridge. His face was purple and swollen. A light chair lay on its side nearby. We studied his remains only for a moment, and I found myself recalling the old cat's remarks from yesterday. Was this the blood he was referring to? Where's the bedroom? I asked. Through the door to the rear, Quicklime replied. Come on, Larry, I said. We need you to raise a board. The bedroom was a mess, with heaps of empty bottles all about, and the bed was disheveled, its linen smelling of stale human sweat. There's a loose board under the bed, I said to Larry. To Quicklime, then. Which board is it? Quicklime slipped beneath and halted atop the third one in. This one, he said. The one Quicklime's showing us, I told Larry. Raise it. Larry knelt and reached, catching an edge with his fingernails. He found purchase almost immediately and drew it gently upward. Quicklime looked in. I looked in. Larry looked in. The red bandana was still there, but no 3 by 9 inch piece of wood with an eerie painting on it. Gone, Quicklime commented. It must be somewhere in the room with him. We must have missed it. Larry replaced the board, and we returned to the room where Rastoff hung. We searched thoroughly, but it did not seem to be present. I don't think he killed himself, I said, finally. Someone overpowered him while he was drunk or hungover, and then did that to him. They wanted it to look as if he did it to himself. He was pretty strong, Quicklime responded, but if he'd started drinking again this morning, he might not have been able to defend himself well. I relayed our conjectures to Larry, who nodded. The place is so messy you can't really tell whether there was a struggle, he said. Though, for the matter, the killer could have straightened some furniture afterwards. I'll have to go to the constable. I'll tell him I dropped by, found the door open, and walked in. At least I'd visited here before. It's not as if we'd never met. He won't know we weren't that well acquainted. I guess that's best, I told him. Returning my gaze to the corpse, I said, Can't tell from his clothes either. Looks as if he'd slept in them more than once. We moved back to the front room. What are you going to do now, Quicklime? I asked. You want to move in with Jack and me? That might be the simplest, us closers sticking together. I think not, he hissed. I think I'm done with the game. He was a good man. He took care of me. He cared about people, about the whole world. What's the human notion? Compassion? He had a lot of that. It's one of the reasons he drank so much, I think. He felt everyone else's pain too much. No, I'm done with the game. I'll slip back to the woods now. I still know a few burrows, a few places where the mice make their runs. Leave me alone here for a while now. I'll see you around, Snuff. Whatever you think is best, Quicklime, I said. And if the winters get too rough, You know where we live. I do. Goodbye. Good luck. Larry let me out, and we walked back to the road. I'll be going this way then, he said, turning right. And I'll be going this way. I turned left. I'll see you soon for the follow-up on this, he said. Yes. I headed home. And you will lose a friend. The old cat had said that, too. It had slipped my mind until now. Jack was not in, and I did the rounds quickly, leaving everything in good order. Stepping outside then, I located his spoor and tracked him to Crazy Jill's. Greymalk watched me from atop the wall. Hello, Snuff, she said. Hello, Grey. Is Jack here? Yes. He is having a meal with the mistress. He ran low on supplies, and she decided to feed him before their trip. Trip? I asked. What trip? A shopping trip into town. He did say something about being low on necessaries and needing to visit the market soon. Yes, so he sent for a coach. It should be here in an hour or so. It will be exciting to see the town again. You're going too? We're all going. The mistress also needs some things. Shouldn't we stay behind to guard the places? The mistress has a very good day-long warding spell, which she will share. It will also capture likenesses of attempted trespassers. I understand that part of the reason we are going is to see whether anyone tries such a thing. Everyone will see our coach go by. On our return, we may learn who are our most important enemies. This was decided recently, I take it. Just this morning while you were out. Well, this may be a good time for it, I acknowledged. With the big event only a week from tomorrow, and in light of the way things have been going... Oh? She rose, stretched, and jumped down from the wall. There are new developments? Walk with me, I said. Where? To the vicarage. You said we have an hour? All right. We left the yard, headed south. Yes, I told her as we went, we've lost the mad monk, and I recounted the morning's events. And you think the vicar did it? She asked. Probably. He seems our most militant player, but that's not why I wanted to visit his focus. I just wanted to learn the location of the room where he keeps Lynette a prisoner. Of course, she said, and if he has the Count's ring and the Alhrazad icon as well as the Pentacle Bowl, he could do some pretty nasty things between now and next week. You said they mainly increase his technical prowess, and I thought you meant for the ceremony, but he could hurt people with them right now. I asked the mistress. Well, that's technical. But you acted as if it wasn't important. I still don't think it is. He'd be a fool to use the actual tools that way when he should be relying on his own abilities. The tools have this way of producing repercussive effects when they're used extracurricularly. He could wind up hurting himself badly unless he's a real master, and I don't think he is. How can you be sure? I doubt a master would run around with a crossbow shooting at bats or plan on a human sacrifice when it's not absolutely necessary just to be safe. He's insecure in his power. A master aims at economy of operations, not proliferation. That sounds about right, Snuff. But if he's too insecure, mightn't he be tempted to try an operation with the tools against the rest of us anyway? Just to narrow the field and make things easier for himself later on. If he's that foolish, the results are on his own head. And the person he directs the power against? Don't forget that. It could be you. I understand you're safe if your heart is pure. I'll try to remember that. We reached the vicarage, and she led me around to the rear. Up there, she said, looking at a window directly overhead. That's her room. I've never seen her about, I said. I gather from Takala that she's been locked up for several weeks. I wonder how securely. Well, she hasn't come out, to my knowledge, and I told you I saw a chain around her ankle. How thick? That's hard to say. You want me to climb up and take a closer look? Maybe. I wonder whether the vicar is in. We could check the stable, see whether his horse is there. Let's do that. So we headed to the small stable in the rear and entered there. There were 2 stalls, and both were empty. "Off on a house call," she said. "What do you want?" came a voice from the rafters. Looking up, I beheld the albino raven. "Hello, Tikala," Greymalk said. "We were just passing by and wanted to see whether you'd heard the news about Rastov." There followed a moment's silence. Then, "What about Rastov?" "He's dead," Greymalk said. "Hanged." "And what of the snake?" "Gone back to the woods." "Good. Never liked snakes. They raid nests, eat eggs." "Have you any news?" "Only that the big man has been about again. There was an argument at the farmhouse, and he went out to the barn for a time and crouched in the corner. The good doctor went after him, and there was more argument. He ran off into the night. Went back later, though." "That's interesting. I wonder what that was about." "I don't know." "Well, we'll be going now. Goodbye." "Yes." We departed and returned to the vicarage. Greymalk looked back. "She can't see us from that rafter," she said. "Do you want me to climb up?" "Wait," I said. "I want to try a trick I learned from Larry." I approached the back door and checked the stable again. I could see no flash of white. Rising onto my hind legs, I put a paw against the door for balance, held it a moment, and then dropped it to join the other in pressing on the knob toward its center. I turned my body as I made the effort. I had to try 3 times, adjusting my grip. The 3rd time it went far enough to make a clicking sound, and my weight caused the door to swing inward. I dropped into a normal position and entered. "That's quite a trick," she said, following me. "Do you feel any wards?" "No." I pushed the door almost shut with my shoulder. It had to be paw openable quickly on our return. "Well, now what?" she said. "Let's find the stairwell. I'd like to see how the girl is secured." We stopped in the study on the way, and she showed me the bowl and its skull. The bowl was indeed the real thing. I'd seen it many times before. Neither the icon nor the ring lay in plain sight, however, and I haven't the time to try my skill on drawers. We returned to our search for stairs. They were located along the west wall. We mounted it, and Greymalk led me to Lynette's room. The door was closed, but it did not seem necessary that it be locked with her chained up. I tried the door trick again, and it worked on the first time. I'll have to see whether Larry had any other good ones. As we entered, Lynette's eyes widened, and she said, "Oh, I'll go rub up against her and let her pet me," Greymalk said. "That makes people happy. You can be looking at the chain while I do that." It was actually the locks in which I was most interested, but even as I advanced to do that, I heard the distant clopping of a horse's hooves approaching at a very rapid pace. "Uh-oh," Greymalk said amid purrings as the girl stroked her and told her how pretty she was. "Tikala must have seen us come in, flew off, and given alarm." I went through with my inspection. The chain was heavy enough to do its job, and the lock that secured it to the bed frame was impressively heavy. The one which fastened it to Lynette's ankle was smaller, but still hardly a thing to be dealt with in a moment. "I know enough," I said, as the hoofbeats came up beside the house, turned the corner, and I heard a horse blowing heavily. "Race you home," Greymalk said, leaping to the floor and running for the stairs. The rider was dismounting as we bounded to the first floor. A second or two later, I heard the back door open and then slam. "Bad," Greymalk said. "Very bad." And we'll have to pause there for the first half of October 23rd.